Patrick Johnston, welcome to Canucks This Week. Everyone, welcome to Canucks This Week. You can get all of our Canuck offerings at theprovince.com, vancouversun.com, and sign up for our newsletters. You'll have all this content delivered to you every week, however you get this. I would issue a Happy New Year, but as we noted last week, Patrick, until the Canucks win, you were allowed to do that. We are now no longer allowed to wish anyone a Happy New Year. We're too deep into the month.
This was a conversation point in last weekend. Tony Brar, the Oilers TV reporter, lovely guy. We hadn't seen each other since I guess the beginning of the season. And he goes, is it Happy New Year? And I literally said, I just had a conversation with my boss about our old colleague Jason Boschford and how upset he would get if you wished someone a happy birthday. Too far.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Too far.
He'd probably get upset if you wished him a happy birthday too.
He would have gotten very upset about just Anyway.
What's happy about it? Yeah. So first home win.
Podcast talking about smiling and parties.
And
fireworks.
I have to admit, obviously people want the tank. They want the shot at the highest draft pick. But I have to admit it was heartwarming for me to see the ovation the players got at the end of the game. We forget that people buy tickets. They don't buy tickets to see the team suck just because they want a higher draft pick. They buy tickets because they want to be entertained. Winning is more entertaining than losing. First win on home ice in regulation since December 9th. First win in regulation since December 19th. And first win of 2026 since the shootout win against the Kraken. Sum up this losing streak for me, Patrick. Again, people will talk about why they want the team to have a losing record. Frankly, at this point, we know the team's not going anywhere. But are they really a historically bad team in this franchise?
Well, no. This is the weird thing. And, I've been talking about this. I wrote about that 98-99 team yesterday. And that was a pretty bad hockey team. We look at... It was sort of that was in many ways an intentionally bad hockey team or an accidentally bad hockey team because Bure holds out and Brian Burke basically doesn't, he's like, I'm going to trade you, but we're just going to go with this. And he knew he needed to reset the team. So, this is a team that's running out guys like Harry York and Darby Hendrickson. And, listen, they had NHL careers. That's just more than you and I can ever say. But when it comes to the quality of team that was there, they were lacked scoring punch, And obviously the defense was a work in progress. So on and so on. The goalies weren't very good. Corey Hirsch. Hershey, I love talking to him. He's openly written about how his career went sideways because his brain was broken. But Corey is at the end of his really NHL run there. Garth Snow, everyone loved Garth Snow, huge fan favorite. But, Garth Snow was on the Canucks and not the Flyers, and there was a reason why. So that team was pretty bad. There's some teams in the 80s that were pretty, I were talking about this, that were pretty bad. And you look at this team, and you're like, obviously the defense core has 3 young guys on it and 3 older guys, and 2 of the 3 older guys are not having very good years, and the young guys are looking like a mess a lot of the time. So, you could say this is not a very good defense core, given how they performed. And up front, the story's been told. How many times has the story been told? Maybe it's time to update. I've been sort of mulling over story ideas. Maybe it's time to update second-line center, generic second-line center, who has had a terrible season, right? The Filipino, I guess, will be back soon, perhaps even as soon as Friday. But the dynamic of this roster has been that there's not been enough strength up the middle, and then the system has not worked, right? They've been a chaotic defensive mess. So it is not a very good team. It is a surprisingly not very good team. I did say this would be a playoff team coming into the season, and I still think that is where this team should have been, but they don't have Quinn Hughes anymore. And the list of lack of production from veteran forwards, which Adam Foote essentially finally called out on Tuesday, a game after I essentially asked him about it, is the other problem. Like, Connor Garland has not scored on a goalie since November. Brock Boeser had finally scored last night, his second goal in 25 games, I think. So the performances in the end have told the tale, right? And so if you're not performing, you're not very good, right? Like, that's the truth. So, we sort of look at this team, and it is not wrong, I think, in the end, despite what we thought it was going to be and how it kind of looks on paper. Honestly, Paul, at the end, the more I've thought about it, this team does look a lot like those pretty dour teams in the mid-'80s, the teams you were growing up with.
But okay, so that it kind of makes my point for me. When you look at it, okay, we're all happy that they won last night.
Yeah.
They are still 7 points behind St. Louis, who are the second worst. Like, we're not talking about, they're right there, and if they win games in hand, they'll be 30th. Right. Like, they are significantly below the next worst team. Tied with the Blues for the worst plus goal differential in the league, the worst record in the last 10. Yeah. They can't score. They are poor defensively.
Yeah.
But I think your juxtaposition of the team in the late 90s, which, say what you will about Mark Messier, and his numbers actually weren't as bad as you might think when he was with the Canucks, but people didn't. There's people who talk, I don't want to revisit that, that's a summer topic, but people do talk around that team talk about how he did rebuild the culture in that locker room a little bit. And yes, the NHL changed. Like, the Canucks got close in 94, had all this promise, didn't fulfill it, went for it, the league changed, right? They've got Bure, they got McGillney, they had talent. And then Bure held out. The chemistry was off, that team didn't click.
Yeah.
The teams in the 80s had no talent because free agency didn't exist.
Right.
And it's solely, you had to get a superstar when you were drafting in the top 10, or you could, or make a trade, or you could never turn your franchise around.
Right. But fundamentally, it was about picking players. I mean, that was
right.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. But when I look at this team, when we talk about that, yes, they're a terrible team.
Right.
But is it system? Is it coaching? Is it construction? Because we have young players that this is the goal of the three guys they got from Quinn Hughes and guys like Tom Wielander and maybe even you still throw Holigan, and you hope they'll progress. But Patrick, if you look at the talent that's on the team, the fact that Jake Debrusk should be doing more, Brock Boeser should be doing more, Connor Garland should be doing more. Like, and then even getting more goals from defense. I know Roenick had a good game last night. So I say, like, it's one thing if you don't have a lot of talent, but if all your talent is underperforming, where does the problem lie?
Well, I think you just said it. If it's all your talent that's underperforming, if you truly believe that, then it's how they're being directed. And this is a point that many have made. I think I've made it before. But if you want to recognize the difference in coaching, and I know there were a lot of people that got kind of over Rick Tocchet. Just look at the difference between last season and this season in Philadelphia, and conversely, last season and this season in Vancouver, right? Like, you are looking at a guy who has a defense-first system, and his priority and his belief is that if you fix up your own end, you make it hard to score, that will lead inherently to a balance in your favor. Now, it's not exciting hockey. There is no doubt about that. If he has the horses, and I think we saw that in 23-24 to a degree, right? He did actually, for the one time in his career, have horses on offense. And that team could go for it, and that team scored a lot of goals. Now, they obviously hit a bit of a wall as they got into the playoffs. But nonetheless, and I had quite the debate with Thomas Drance about this the other day. Was that team good? I would say yes.
Did he let you speak?
Amazingly, we speak.
I said, did he let you speak?
Yes, he did. And here's the debate. I said, listen, I think that team was good. And he said, why? He said, how can you? He said they were fraudulent. They weren't good the season before, and they weren't good the season after. And I listen, I will take time for that. But I think in the moment, that was a good team. They played fun hockey. They were playing smart hockey. They were very good on defense. And they were getting big performances from their key players, right? And so that is, to me, what matters, is how the coach set the team up. Like, I think I still subscribe to most that coaches can do more to hurt than help their team, right? But I think if you put your players in position to succeed, that's fundamentally the team with the better players wins most of the time, right? There are examples where in a short run, a team that works harder than the other team can win. But fundamentally, you look at the teams, and we've talked about this many times, and I've written this almost every year. If you look at the teams that make the Final Four of the playoffs every year, they are within the top 8 best teams in the NHL, right? Like there's no team that makes the last 4 of the NHL of the Stanley Cup playoffs that is a team that's on the bubble. It just doesn't happen. And if there's an exception, it's teams like St. Louis who came from nowhere but figured it out, right? Like the St. Louis example is not one to follow; it's one to understand. So, in the end, this team has, the coach made a choice. Adam Foote made a choice to change how this team was going to defend. And that's not the only reason this season has been a disaster, but it did not help, that's for sure.
So let's get into that a little bit. You and I talked about this morning. Very popular coach, Bruce Boudreau, was on TSN, and he made a comment that I haven't seen get much traction elsewhere, but I raised a really good point to me. He said when he was coaching, they were over 500.
Yeah.
He finished that season, it was a bit of a revelation. Everyone was like, wow. Then they changed 12 players that season.
Yeah.
The following season, they changed another, some of those players who were part of that 12 then left again.
Yeah.
So you had 12 players again. So you have this vaunted core, right? You got Hughes, Pettersson, Boeser, Demko, whatever.
Yeah.
But you had 12 changes around that, and then another 12 changes. Then he gets let go, and Tocchet comes in.
Yeah.
And Tocchet has this great run. We talk about the playoffs, and they take the Oilers with it. Then there's a further 10 changes to his team. Boudreau's point, whether you put stock in it or not, or whether it's just sour grapes on his part, because he was a big part of that change, is you can't have this wholesale changeover of double-digit players every single season and hope to have continuity and build on that. And I also do have sympathy for where the Canucks were coming from. They were this close to beating the Oilers and getting to the Western Conference Final.
Right.
And then you think, what's going to put us over the top? And there were contracts, and there were bad contracts still hanging over from Jim Benning. So what do you do now that the team is the worst in the NHL? Are you still looking at wholesale change, or do you have to start to lock in your players and say, we're going to grow with this group? With obviously, you've got to add more talent. There's no doubt about that. And if they have a high draft pick, first or second, that's going to look after that.
Yeah. Well, listen, Bruce isn't alone in sort of thinking about how the team turned over. Like Rick Tocchet, in the end, sort of when I can't remember when we had this conversation, but it's obviously looking back at last season, and they made I think he would admit they made a mistake. They tried to turn over the roster too much, right? Like they made huge moves for Zadorov and Lindholm, and they could have kept Zadorov. Now, listen, are we saying Zadorov makes a huge difference for this team? I don't know, but personality was big. People surely loved watching him play. He was not a perfect defenseman, but I think we saw the way he played in the playoffs. He was masterful in the playoffs. He was great.
He was their best player.
He was their yeah. I think that's a really good case for that. Absolutely. Brock Boeser was also very good. You might recall.
Yeah, absolutely. You know who wasn't good? Elias Pettersson, but he's still here. Yeah, and we'll get to him in a second.
Yeah. He at the end of the day, they tried to change too much, right? Like they built a structure and then they changed too much, and then a whole bunch of other. Obviously, the Miller Pettersson thing blew up. To me, that the problem became exactly Bruce is right, and the other thing too. I mean, I mentioned this to you. Side note, like I was actually looking, like it's the what's today? Wednesday night was the 3rd anniversary of Bruce Boudreau's last game as coach. And it was the last Bruce. There it is. It was emotional. They lost, but it was emotional. Like everything, nothing was going right.
Well, and everyone knew it was coming. Yeah. It was just awful. It was just handled so poorly. 4
guys left on the left. Sorry, that lineup. There are 4 guys still on the roster, right? 5 if you include Demko, if I remember right, was injured. But anyway, the goalie was.
If you remember right, trying to remember when he was healthy, Patrick.
In
the last 3 years,
Spencer Martin was the goalie. Like it's just, change is inevitable. Teams should never stand still. But the sort of churn that we've seen, even while they did have that one good season, the churn that we've seen since this manager has come in, I suppose is good because you should be trying new guys. But it is difficult to find any consistency when you're constantly changing players, and whether that's self-imposed or because of injury.
I was walking my dog last night and saw some poor fellow walking, obviously somewhere to go watch the game, or maybe he was actually headed to Rogers in the black skate Sherwood jersey. And they had to get rid of Sherwood. I think they got a good return for him. I think they handled that well. But just maybe I question this fellow's choices to spend money on a Sherwood jersey. The great Canuck while he was here, but just a short-term Canuck, right? And it's one of those little weird things. Like, you got a kid or yourself, maybe you're a big fan. Whose jersey would you buy? And it's just like, this is where the team is. You talk about turnover. You talk about, like, do you want to put your Sherwood jersey in your collection with your Hughes jersey?
Yeah.
And your Horvat jersey and your like, it's the turnover, that lack of, like, we look at those teams, and I guess we're being a little bit hypocritical because the Canucks have held on to their cores too long when they've had success. But this seems to me to be just crazy. So let's bring it back now. The other thing Boudreau was talking about, trade rumors, and everyone wants Pettersson traded, right? Everyone he's going to be, if he's ever going to be the player he was, he needs to do it somewhere else. But you and I have been doing these videos now for 2 years about their lack of depth at center. And this year, the story has been, before Hughes was traded, that what this team was screaming for was a second-line center.
Right.
And the mantra from everyone who would talk, not just in this market, was they're hard to get. There's a lack of good center depth in the NHL right now.
Yeah.
So when you look at the Canucks, and we will all get excited if they win the draft lottery, and whether they draft, most rankings now have Gavin McKenna as the number 2 prospect. The number 1 is another Swede by the name of Ivor Stenberg. Stenberg and McKenna are both wingers. So if you trade Pettersson for more capital, the top players in the draft are not centers. They don't have very many centers in the organization. And Hedl, that you talked about, who was the hope for the second-line center, is one hit away. Always, like, one hit has put him out for months. I just don't know how you can count on that as anything more than a luxury once you build your roster otherwise. So does it make any sense to you at all that this talk persists of trading Elias Pettersson? Because who are you going to play? You get this shiny new winger. Who is he going to play with?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Like, and that's why I think in the end, I never say never, but I do think it's highly unlikely. Because who is going to, if you're trading for Pettersson, are you really trading a center that the Canucks are going to want, right? Like he adds. I think he would. Any team that trades for him, I think, is making a right move. He adds to that roster, right? But because he's not, he's having an okay season, but not an amazing season. I just don't think you're getting the value that the Canucks. I don't. It's one of those ones where it's. There's no obvious reason to think that he is a net negative right now for this roster, right? Like, if there was a personality issue, Rick Tocchet, everyone said it last year. For all the guys who were on the sort of Miller camp, everyone said, listen, I love JT, but he had to go. And for whatever reason that is, it's clear he couldn't stay, right? So there was a personnel issue. He had to leave.
And he's been awful in New York.
And he's been awful in New York. So it's not like if he stays here, anything's different.
Yeah, it's not like Horvat, who you let go and has now played himself into. Yeah.
Like, that's, that's a discussion that's an obvious one. Did they make the right choice? In hindsight, no, they made the wrong choice.
Well, you and I have talked about this. We will do this in a future video. We're promising people this. When you just sort of casually cast your mind back the last 3 or 4 years, every move they made appears to have been the wrong one.
Just about, yeah. I mean,
yeah.
Other than trying to build up that 24 team. Anyway, like, there's been a long run of poor choices. There's absolutely no doubt. This is so many ways.
It's my life story, Patrick.
What's that?
That's my life story.
Yes, well,
long run of poor choices,
and an unmade bed. Anyway, listen, Pettersson, they've turned almost, like I said, they've turned over almost the entire roster, right? The guys left are Pettersson, Garland, Boeser, Demko, Hronek, I guess, wasn't on. No, Boudreau still had Horvat. He still had Horvat, Miller, and Pettersson. Like, that's the thing that we'll think about. Is that triumvirate, like those three centers, that is something to ponder, right? Like, they had the three guys, and then
we got a triumvirate and a ponder in the same comment. Yeah. Jonathan McDonald will be very proud of you.
Very happy.
But on that point, I think that's a fantastic point. And you look at how many players have gone, but the other part of that is, who have you added? like it's one thing to weed out an aging roster, or there's a conflict with Miller and you feel that yes, he's on the backside, so you move him out. The picks that they had given away in order to get to that point, you talked about Zadorov and Lindholm, and you go back to actually acquiring JT Miller, Podkolzin moved on, like go down the list. This has also been the problem is it's not that big a deal to turn over your roster to a lesser degree if you have the youth coming through, but they haven't had that. When you take away, you talk about those, the guys that are left here from that period, who has joined of any real quality? And I think that's why they find themselves rock bottom in the NHL.
Well, I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, like I like Linus Karlsson. I like Max Sasson. Like I think both of those guys are useful, but they're realistically, like Sasson especially, fourth line players, right? Like Karlsson has showed enough that I think he could be a useful enough third line winger. But the list is short. And both, by the way, like, you know, Sasson's a free agent. Karlsson was a throwaway pickup in a trade that was engineered essentially by the Canucks analytics department in 2019. You know, the sort of the rest of the story here. You're absolutely right. Like Jonathan Lekkerimäki is still in the minors, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not writing him off yet, but that feels notable, right? The point has been made. You know, the Canucks now have 2 second-round picks in this year's draft. They've barely picked in the second round, no matter who's been in charge for the last decade. So it is no surprise that there's nobody coming through. And then, of course, when they did pick in the second round, they passed over guys like Logan Stankoven and they picked Danil Klimovich. Again, that is the last regime, but like misfire after misfire after misfire.
Yeah.
So and now Niels Hoaglander's on the team, and he's, you know, he can't put the puck in the net. Like it's rather astounding. You're absolutely right. There's just been no internal push. There's been no ability to kind of bring guys along, and nor has there been any chance of that because the guys just haven't been good enough. So the young guys just haven't been good enough.
So I wanted to ask you something here. This isn't something we discussed, so maybe it's an unfair question, but it's so cheap and easy to always go at Francesco Aquilini, right? But if we look at how this team is structured and we don't get a ton of insight, like you have more, everyone's an expert online, everyone has a blog, everyone's an aggregator, but you're in the building and you talk to people and you know what's going on. Yeah. So Francesco, clearly, he is the point guy, but he does have a brother in Roberto and a father in Luigi who probably have a say in the biggest matters. Sure. And maybe Francesco has the loudest voice, but there are other voices there. Yeah. The front office has a president in Jim Rutherford. Yeah. Who basically took the wheel away from Patrick Allvin, the GM, to make the biggest trade in the team history for Quinn Hughes. Yeah. Then you have Patrick Allvin. Then you have these ghost figures that we're not allowed to talk to, and Emily Castengay, Cami Granato, and various other parts of the front office. Yeah. Is this a functional structure? And the reason I ask is one of the things with the Leafs were, you know, when Brendan Shanahan was finally let go, it was like, well, we have this amazing hockey brain trust. It was like a 13-person front office with everyone from Cliff Fletcher to Mark Hunter. And it's like, are those too many voices? Like, I guess if you're not allowed to talk to these other components, and I know you have a good relationship with Jim Rutherford. Yeah. But I just wonder what the direction, what the structure is when you have this turnover with the players and issues with the coach. And where are we going? And are we rebuilding? Are we retooling? Burn it down. Yeah. Let's get rid of Pettersson. Like, I don't know if they have a coherent, I guess, mandate or mission statement of what they want to be. Well,
I mean, you're right. I have only mostly impressions to go off with the people that are involved, right? Like I talk to Rutherford fairly often. I've talked to Allvin fairly often. You hear sort of from people adjacent to things. Sort of as a group, I think they're pretty aligned. Allvin clearly is back running the meetings, or at least that's the claim from Rutherford when I asked him about it last week. That said, and this goes back a long time, and you've mentioned already, like the sort of base issue continues to be the tone set from the top, and certainly right now they're talking about rebuild. Just so we're clear, like, as a group, we asked to speak to the owner a week ago.
Yeah.
And I know request got submitted. Haven't heard anything.
He has not spoke to anyone outside of their own sphere in a free-ranging media interview since 2018. Denise Ryan, a feature writer for the Vancouver Sun, was the last person to basically get a one-on-one interview with him.
Yeah, a one-on-one. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
You're right. So, like, we spoke with him, I think, when
requests were put in by Ed Willis.
Yeah.
You've done it. Yeah.
Requests. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So, whatever it is that is thought there is not known. We have to only go with what we can see, and you hear it time and again about sort of the negative, you should just be happy to be here sort of mentality that comes from the top of the organization. And I don't think that's necessarily how the attitude is inside of hockey operations, but if that's the mentality at the top, it's no wonder that the last 10, 15 years have gone as they've gone, because there is no accountability, right? Like, it's a mentality of,
absolutely,
somebody else's fault. And if that's how the top feels, even if the people underneath are doing their best and they're good people, and basically everybody I encounter there is a good person.
Jim Benning got, savaged for some of the things that happened, and maybe rightly so, but you also don't know what the direction is from the owner.
Yeah, that's it.
Right?
Anyway, the organizational reality has been that it's been a very sort of short-term, small-minded chase for profits that led nowhere, with little planning. And as our old friend Ray Ferrari used to say, the no plan, right? And that was consistently the problem. And we've come in with this group that came in with a plan, right? Like, they sort of looked at what was here. Here's what we need to do. Some of it was a culture thing. And they have turned the roster over for the most part, right? So now we're standing in this rebuild, and a lot of these decisions, a lot of the reason why we're in the moment we are today is because of decisions that were made before that were not with a rebuild in mind. They simply misfired and they got it wrong. So here we are.
Absolutely. But if you're talking, and I know you've got a piece up from Ben Kuzma on Tyler Myers. Yeah. If the Toronto Maple Leafs want Tyler Myers because their defense is clearly lacking and they're thinking that this is the playoff run, who do they call? Jim? Patrick?
They call
Cammy?
Patrick. No, they call
Drance?
Patrick. They do call Patrick. They call Drance. No, they call Patrick, right? And then it's on him to figure it out. And, he consults with his staff, and they figure it out as a group. That's been the mentality. But here we are. We're looking at a team that has played poorly, is not going to make the playoffs, is going to rebuild, they claim. We'll see where what the next moves are. I think they're still going to move forward, and I think they'll still try to move a defenseman. And I do think that they would like to get another pick in the top 50, maybe two more, right? Because then you have a class of interesting prospects that you can try to bring forward. And should this have been done 3 or 4 years ago? Yes. Should this have been done 10 years ago? Yes. Like, this is not
5 picks in the top 50, including what is presumably going to be a top 2 or 3 pick, is a pretty good way to get into a quick rebuild. Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Just before we finish here, I did want to ask you something. We were talking about Adam Foote earlier and we got sidetracked. This is my concern when you look at someone who is handling young players, and are they molding them and are they crafting them the right way? Sure. Let's go back to your 1998-99 comparison. Keenan was a tire fire, but it was more because he was yesterday's man, not someone who's perhaps inexperienced like Adam Foote. Mark Crawford came in and was able to take that group and make them, in his experiences. So I might argue that this team, if you're going all young, you need the right coach that's going to be able to mold them. Mm-hmm. But clearly, I don't think anything will happen until the end of the year. But if things keep going the way they are, and you have so many players who are underperforming what their abilities are and what they're being paid for,
right?
Do you bring the coach back?
Well, I mean, I do think it matters how things go here. The fact that they were losing. There's a cultural concern, I do think, that the impact of too much losing will be difficult for your younger players. Now, so you look at the decision that was made, say in '99, right? First of all, everyone knew that Burke was not going to, that Keenan was not going to last under Burke. He wasn't Burke's pick. that they were literally oil and water, right? Like this was just guys that do not get along. Road trips where only one of them would go, or not talking, like just chaos. Mark Crawford was Brian Burke's guy in the end, right? He was viewed as a good young coach who had obviously won the Stanley Cup, who won in the Olympics, had a lot going for him. In hindsight,
He didn't win in the Olympics.
What's that?
He didn't win in the Olympics.
No, sorry, he didn't win in the Olympics, being coached in the Olympics. Sorry, did I say win in the Olympics? He coached,
He left Gretzky on the bench in the shootout.
No, sorry, if I said win in the Olympics, I misspoke. I didn't mean that. I meant just he'd been an Olympic coach, right? Like he'd been at the pinnacle of the game.
If Dominic Hasek hadn't been like out of his mind, they probably win the gold medal, but he was, and they didn't. So
the point is that he was a good young coach, and he was Brian Burke's guy. And obviously, there's things we now know about how he approached coaching that were not good. I would say to his credit, he has at least discussed that. That said, he also got results. Like he did win, right? He was the right choice, and the team got better under his charge. So, with that in mind, obviously Adam Foote was picked by this management group, whether it was to keep Quinn Hughes happy or whether it was because he simply was the affordable choice. Either way, it has not worked. So, is there a case? I think there's a case to say, listen, you get to the Olympic break, they're away for 2 weeks, give Adam a handshake on his way out the door, and you bring up Manny Malhotra. Abbotsford's having a disastrous season, and that's not Manny Malhotra's fault. It's the roster construction problem. But you bring Manny in, and he becomes...
It certainly has a ring of truth to it, Patrick.
But, so I think there's a case for that. We'll see what happens. I am not convinced that management is convinced on Adam Foote that this is a guy to go forward with. You don't want to, in the end, you don't want to win too much. So someone else was saying to me, well, okay, what's the cushion here, right? How far behind do you want? Are you comfortable with your team getting before you make the positive change? Like I listen. You
know what, Patrick? Making up 7 points on anyone is going to be difficult.
It's going to be hard. Yeah.
Now, if there's a team that could plunge, it could be St. Louis because of their problems in goal, right? So, I guess, but I think you could be safe of changing the coach, and that's a lot of points. Anyway, we know they're not getting the number one pick in the lottery anyway, right?
What I was going to say was the question then becomes, the young guys, and because I was working on this story, I didn't end up putting this 98-99 story. I didn't end up putting our current voice in, but I did talk to Linus Karlsson, right? And here's a guy who is very conscious of his career, like how he's gotten to where he's gotten. He's had to work. He's always had talent. There's always been doubts. He's always had to get better, right? And now he's proven himself to be a scorer in the NHL, like a guy who can score enough, I should say, in the NHL to keep him on the roster, which was a task when he and I spoke at the beginning of the year. It was a task he laid out for himself. It wasn't just can he compete, but can I put the puck in the net? And that's where this team is at. Like, how does this affect guys like that? Is Karlsson able to keep his chin up? Are these defensemen able to keep their chin up? I think they are. And yet, you find yourself wondering if there's too much losing. You have to believe in the direction in front of you. And I think they believe in management's direction. Do they believe in the coach's direction? And that becomes the question that Jim Rutherford and Patrick Aldean are going to have to answer.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've gone long here. Appreciate your thoughts. I'm not going to do the prediction thing for the week because, they've got all at home. They've got the Devils on Friday, the Penguins on Sunday, the Sharks on Tuesday, and next Thursday against the Ducks. So they're clearly going 4-0 in that and having a 5-game win streak. So I'm not even going to ask you what you think about that. I am curious, though, that first of all, Sunday games, every Sunday game I've been to has been death in terms of atmosphere. 3:00 puck drop, which is right up against the Seahawks in the NFC Championship. I know there's a lot of people who don't follow the NFL who are Canuck fans, but I really wonder what the attendance and atmosphere of that game is going to be. It's Sydney. Maybe the last time you see him here, so maybe that's it. But
Yeah, like I do think it's a game for hockey fans, and I think there's a lot of people who are there who really do appreciate Sidney Crosby just as a hockey guy. Obviously, there's lots of Penguins fans, so I don't know if we'll see necessarily repeat of what we saw with the Oilers on Saturday, where it was an Oilers home game. Who needs a ticketing department when you can just lean on star players coming from other teams and you never have to build any brand loyalty? Why would you do such a thing?
The Vancouver Grizzlies model.
Anyway, it's an interesting question. You know, the Penguins are obviously in a playoff fight. They aren't particularly good, but they are in a playoff fight. They've got obviously the old stars. They got some interesting younger players, and they have an old buddy in Archer Shilovs in goal.
Yeah.
But yeah, like listen, this and Stuart Skinner, who's of course a story unto himself.
Yeah.
So much of what the Penguins are doing is what the Canucks sort of wish they were doing. And the Penguins were in even a tougher spot than this team was, right? Like they can't really trade their 2-star players, and they had no prospects, and they've done a poor job of drafting. Well, yeah, I mean, ironically, look who's in charge here.
Who's involved in that drafting, Patrick? Interesting question. We'll have to tackle that next week. We've gone long here. So
Yeah.
I know you got stuff to write. Appreciate people listening to us. I don't appreciate you watching us because there's nothing to look at. But again, province.com, vancouversun.com, sign up for our Canuck Report newsletter. You'll get everything delivered to you. Thank you, Patrick. We will talk to you next week. Actually, I'll talk to you later on today, but we'll talk to you on camera next week.
Everybody.
All right, bye.